It was a lot, wasn't it? It was so much information. Personally, I found it both inspiring and a little overwhelming. And I'm not trying to prime you here, but we've listened to sort of like 20 minutes of really good discussion. There's a great film there from the gentleman from Gusto with some very innovative ideas. But like in all these conversations, we probably kind of recall 2 or 3 things, and they're often kind of interesting and unusual. So just as I ask you to think back to the last sort of 20, 25 minutes, let me start with you, Tabby. What struck you? What do you recall from from those conversations?
I think for me personally is when the panelist said, like, with the metal that she uses, it has value. So we are encouraged to recycle because we get something back out of value. When you see plastic, a lot of the times we don't see value. That's why we just throw it away willy-nilly, sorry. So when it comes to, like, for example, when I was growing up, we had glass bottles and you take them to a recycling point and you get money back. And people were very careful making sure they kept their glass bottles, didn't break them, and took them back, and therefore it encouraged people to keep recycling. And I think sometimes the old ways are the best ways. We can look back and see how we used to use our materials and how we can adapt that again.
Yeah, I mean, there's just as you said it, these materials are precious. They have a value. The world runs on money. There's money in these old materials or these new old materials. And that's a fantastic takeout. And I think, completely surprised me also that, like, oh wow, it's looking back is sometimes a good way of looking forward as well. So, Tanya, what was your takeaway? What struck you as you sort of reflected on the conversations?
Yes, one thing that really struck me was when one of the panelists asked in terms of whether consumers need to stand up and act and speak up more, or whether there needs to be more regulation on businesses in terms of actually making that positive change. And I love how Jenny put it. Everyone actually plays a role. Whether it's the consumer or the business, and we have to take responsibility in terms of what we have to do, rather than actually blaming the finger on, okay, you need to do this, you need to do that. I think we all need to collectively, play that role within ourselves. What can we do to make that change and make those, small steps, even if it's small steps, because that's big in the end. So that's one thing that really struck out to me, and Jenny put it beautifully. So yeah.
Well, you have too. I mean, we need more people like you.
Yeah.
How easy is it for you to speak up in your day-to-day? Just think about yourself in your life and everything else that you're doing. How do you find it for you to sort of walk into a supermarket and say, I'm not going to buy that piece of packaging, or what's your way of, how are you going to speak up?
I mean, it's something where awareness needs to happen. I need to obviously, there needs to be a level of education in terms of, okay, I have to have enough information to know what is it that I'm actually buying. And that's also down to businesses, but then also down to myself. I need to be aware exactly what is out there and what I can do. So, for example, whether that means that I have to eat less meat and then eat more vegetables, or whether it means that I have to, something that is not less, because I can't be standing in the supermarket and being like, okay, what does it, because I'll be standing there all day. But it's also just actively knowing exactly what is it that I can, is sustainable out there, that is quick and efficient. So whether it means that, I don't have to overbuy so much, and that's something that I've taken today, not buying too much food, so that leads into more wastage, as well as also less meat. That's easy. So yeah.
Some really, really helpful tips and really, really simple.
Yeah.
Vanessa, your takeout on what you heard in the last sort of half an hour?
A lot. I think that one of the interesting facts was around food consumption being, I think it was 25% contributor, and recycling was about 4%. And yet you hear so much about recycling the plastic and the waste that you use, but in comparison, proportionally, it's what we eat that is the problem. And I think the biggest thing, aside from that being the one takeaway I remembered, was that there's a lot of information. Yeah. So it's hard to decipher which bits of information you should digest, use, and implement on top of just trying to get through your day to day. So I thought it was, like you said in the beginning, overwhelming was the best way to describe it.
Lots of messages.
Yeah.
All well-meaning. Which one do you pick first?
And I think it depends. So I've kind of gone through different points in life where, I've had the means and I haven't had the means, the have-nots. And I think depending on who you are, depends on what you can do. So if you can only afford a quick meal from McDonald's where you don't know where the meat comes from, that's what you can afford. If you have the luxury to be able to go to, a whole market or somewhere like that and get food that is locally sourced,
Yeah.
then you have the luxury of doing that. But there's a lot of onus it feels on the individual to make decisions with the information that's not really clear.
Yeah, it's a really important point. I think, if we think about this event, this is sort of part of a broader idea of peace. And without peace, you can't actually get to a lot of these really important topics. And all the other stuff that you have to deal with in your life, there's just lots and lots of things to deal with. Tell me about some of the things that sort of, let's say, are more important. I don't mean that in an ethical sense, but just the day-to-day things that are sort of don't allow you to do more for the climate than you perhaps would like to.
Yeah, I think first of all, just your bills. Let's be real. We live in a state of inflation, so there isn't that much money once you've paid your necessities off to do anything else and think about climate change. It feels like a nice to have. I'll get to it when I have the capacity to get to it. There's things that people that have children, people that don't, people that work full-time jobs. Then you're asking them to maintain that, keep fit, keep healthy, stay well mentally, and then go and think about the planet after that. It can feel overwhelming just to manage life in general, let alone to try and focus on recycling or what meat to get or going to Sainsbury's. Don't try, don't do this, don't take. It's a lot.
Yeah, and there are bills, and we know the energy crisis, and we know all of these things, and job market, and all of those things are daily challenges. Coming back to you, Tabby, anything else that you might do differently? I know this is a bit of a bubble today, but is there anything that struck you that you might do differently coming out of this conversation today?
I think I'll definitely feel more positive and more self-aware of how I'm contributing towards and the packaging that I use, and reading labels and the information I'm given and the information I take in about how everything gets recycled. Because it's true, a lot of the materials we think are all recyclable. They say recycle, but at this point, or recycle at that point. So, and I also, I think, find ways where I can also speak to these companies, or how I can put a voice to it. Because I know sometimes we think, I can't do anything, I don't have time to go protest, I don't have time to go out and speak. But there are little ways that we can make change, especially in our community. Community is such a driving force in the way we make change, because one voice is a whisper, but a whole community is a shout. So I think if going into my community and finding ways to change my community can probably lead to bigger change within society.
I mean, just so beautifully put, this idea that we all have a voice and every little voice counts, and the more we add them up, the better. I want to finish off on Jacob, the young lad that dashed over. He was a bag of nerves, but really got engaged. And I think, leaving the last word to the youth, he said via his mum's text, a message to the brand gods. I think it meant just a message for the brand people, but brand gods is quite interesting. Try and push us so we can grow stronger environmentally. Even if we don't like it, someone will. Thank you for that, Jacob. And I think that's the message. We want change, we need help, we're ready, we want to participate. You need to make it easier for us. Make it easier for us, and we will participate, and we'll drive that green demand that we so desperately need. Thank you, and over and out from here.